As the sun sets on another year, and as we stand on the precipice of a new one, we're called here by a sound that is both ancient and utterly new. Yasher Koach to our Tokeya, Michael Bernstein, to our 95-year-old shofar caller, Abe Birnbaum. The shofar is the cry of our ancestors. It is the whisper of our own souls. It is a sound that breaks through the noise of our daily lives, the constant buzz of our phones, the endless stream of news, the clamor of our anxieties, and forces us to pause, to listen, and to truly hear. Rosh Hashanah is not just apples and honey. It is Yom Hadin, a day of judgment. Judgment. It is an unsettling concept, but it is meant to inspire reverence, awe, and radical honesty. We stand before God and are asked, where were you this year? Where was your heart? Where was your voice? Where was your hand? Our actions and our inactions, the opportunities for goodness that we missed, the silences we maintained when we should have spoken. In that spirit of radical honesty, I have a heavy responsibility this year to speak at a time of tremendous challenge for the Jewish people around the world, but particularly for the Jewish people in Canada. And I thought to frame my remarks less as a pronouncement, but rather as a deeply personal, heartfelt plea. Just last week, senior members of the Canadian Jewish community met privately with Prime Minister Mark Carney. Because the meeting was behind closed doors, we do not know what was said, what concerns were raised, or what impressions each side carried away. But that silence should not be the final word. Today, I want to offer the conversation I wish I could have had in that room, my own honest exchange with the Prime Minister about what it feels like to be a Jew in Canada today. So I'm going to speak these words as if he were here listening, because perhaps through the power of our collective voice on this holy day, they might reach him, or maybe other civic and community leaders who truly care about all the people they serve. At the very least, I pray that these words will resonate with all of us who feel the weight of these times. Prime Minister Carney, Mark, if I may, I want to speak to you with the kind of honesty that only a shared sacred moment can allow. I know you're a busy man with the weight of a nation on your shoulders, steering Canada through economic storms, climate crises, and global challenges. Your reputation as a thoughtful leader, a champion of sustainability, financial stability, and global interconnectedness is well earned. Your background at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England speaks to a man of intellect and foresight. This is your first Rosh Hashanah as our new Prime Minister, and I truly believe deep down that you care about our Jewish community. I've seen glimpses of it in your general statements on diversity and in your condemnations of hate crimes when they make headlines. You speak of Canada as a mosaic where every piece contributes to the whole. But Mark, that care, while I believe it to be genuine, is being diluted by policies and postures that feel complacent, performative, and at times outright hostile. Let me explain, not in accusation, but in the spirit of Rosh Hashanah's call for honest reflection. Your government's approach seems rooted in a policy of waiting for anti-Semitism to escalate into a front-page crisis before acting, rather than preventing it through education, enforcement, and visible leadership. We've seen a lot of virtue signaling, social media posts on Holocaust Remembrance Day, vague tweets about standing against hate. These are easy, performative gestures, but even members of your own caucus have publicly called them inadequate, the equivalent of a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. Mark, we are a community that has a target on its back. And while your words offer a momentary flicker of solidarity, they are not doing nearly enough to extinguish the fires of hate that burn on our streets and in our digital spaces. We need proactive measures that reflect the gravity of the threat we face, concrete legislative changes, not just empty rhetoric. A tweet does not stop a bullet. A press release does not erase the swastika from our walls. Mark, the Jewish story in this country is a great Canadian story. From the earliest days, Jewish immigrants arrived on these shores fleeing persecution and pogroms, bringing with them not only their resilience, but their innovation. We founded businesses that grew into cornerstones of the Canadian economy. Think of the Bronfmans, who revolutionized the spirits industry, the Reichmans, who shaped Toronto's skyline with Canary Wharf-inspired developments, or the countless entrepreneurs who built media empires and financial institutions that serve all Canadians. We have contributed to every facet of Canadian life, pioneering medical research at institutions like the Hospital for Sick Children, advancing legal reforms through figures like Bora Laskin, the first Jewish Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and enriching the arts with talents like Leonard Cohen and Mordechai Richler, and internationally renowned festivals like TIFF. We've stood shoulder to shoulder with other communities in fights for civil rights, supporting the Underground Railroad's legacy, advocating for LGBTQ equality, and marching for environmental justice. We believed in Canada's promise, freedom, safety, and opportunity, and we built it up with our sweat, our intellect, and our unwavering belief in a better future, often giving back through philanthropy, founding hospitals, universities, and charities that benefit all Canadians regardless of faith and background. But now, Mark, that promise feels hollow. The levels of anti-Semitism in Canada have reached a fever pitch that borders on madness. Our synagogues are desecrated with swastikas and hateful graffiti, forcing us to pray behind locked doors. Our schools have been fired upon. Our kosher markets, our Holocaust memorials, none are spared. In Montreal and Toronto, bullets have pierced playgrounds, leaving us no choice but to install bulletproof glass, install dozens of security cameras, and hire an overabundance of security guards and off-duty police officers. This is the reality of Jewish life in Canada today. Families living under the constant hum of a security threat. On the streets of our cities, Jews are harassed simply for wearing a kippah, a Star of David, or for speaking Hebrew. Crowds gather outside hotels to menace Israeli athletes. Strangers hurl slurs at Jews with a venom that echoes the darkest chapters of history. And in our universities, once bastions of learning, Jewish students are intimidated, excluded from clubs, and even physically threatened. Rallies that claim to be for peace quickly collapse into chants glorifying Intifada, into slogans calling for violence against Zionists. Professors entrusted to teach critical thinking instead peddle one-sided narratives that deny Jewish history and indigeneity, recasting Israel as nothing more than a colonial project. And our streets are not only unsafe, they are governed by a justice system paralyzed by ideology. Violent repeat offenders are released again and again. And so as parents, we have to teach our children to keep their eyes open, to change their roots, even to hide their Jewish identity. This is not a mere political dispute, Mark. It is the systematic erosion of security and dignity for Jews in our own country. It is the unraveling of the Canadian mosaic you so often celebrate. And then there's the hostility towards Israel, which is felt so acutely here in Canada. It is a criticism that singles out the Jewish state totally disproportionately, with calls for boycotts or arms embargoes that ignore the context of self-defense. This foreign policy tilts heavily toward one narrative, one side of a deeply complex conflict, while turning a blind eye to the rockets and other attacks that come from Hamas militants in Gaza, Palestinian terrorists in Israel, not to mention the ballistic missiles being fired from Iran and its proxies. For many in our community, it feels like Canada is sanctioning Israel for existing. It is a narrative that gives a dangerous signal to anti-Semites that their hatred is somehow justified, that Jews are fair game because their homeland is illegitimate. Your government's actions give them a veneer of legitimacy, a permission to project their hatred onto us here at home. When the world isolates Israel, Jewish Canadians feel that isolation in their own skin, on their own campuses, in our own neighborhoods. So right now, Mark, I am begging you, we need to know you're here with us. We need your voice. We need your action. We need your presence. Silence in the face of our pain is not neutrality. It's abandonment. It leaves us questioning if Canada's promise of equality applies to us. Let's talk about your support for a Palestinian state, Mark. On the surface, it sounds reasonable, aligning with Canada's desire to see a two-state solution. But the reality is that over 70% of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank approve of the October 7th attack and would do it again if they had the chance. This is according to Palestinian surveys, and even amidst this war's devastation. October 7th, that barbaric massacre that saw 1,200 Israelis murdered in their homes at a music festival celebrating life in peaceful kibbutzim along the border. That massacre where babies were burned alive in ovens, women raped in front of their families, entire families slaughtered while hiding in safe rooms. They would do it again. That's their present mindset. fueled by education systems that glorify martyrdom and erase Jewish history. Imagine, Mark, the terror of living next to a prospective state whose populace harbors such murderous intentions. Israelis are not abstract figures in a geopolitical game. They are people, grandmothers baking challah for Shabbat, children playing soccer in parks, innovators in Tel Aviv curing diseases like cancer through startups that benefit the whole world. The prospect of a neighbor state where schools teach hatred toward Jews, where official maps erase Israel entirely, and where leaders divert international aid to build terror tunnels, rockets, and luxury villas instead of hospitals, schools, and infrastructure, that is not a recipe for peace. It is a blueprint for endless war and endless suffering on both sides. We in the Jewish community are not opposed to Palestinian self-determination. Many of us support a negotiated peace where both sides can thrive in security and prosperity, with borders that allow for economic cooperation and cultural exchange. Israel has offered that to Palestinians before, several times. But peace requires partners who reject violence unequivocally, not partners who celebrate it as a path to liberation. Your support for Palestinian statehood in advance of these issues being resolved feels like a giant betrayal, ignoring the existential fears of an entire people who have faced annihilation too many times. And if you want to help this war, as we all do, look at what your announcement did and is doing. I don't see any war ending. In fact, the day before your announcement was made in July, there was a ceasefire proposal on the table, accepted by both Israel and Hamas. The day after, emboldened by your declaration, Hamas walked away. You handed them a diplomatic victory, not once, but now you did it again. And in doing so, you didn't advance peace, you set it back. Mark, we see the same human suffering in Gaza that you see. The Jewish community does not turn a blind eye to anguish. We grieve for innocent Palestinians, children caught between Hamas's cruelty and the battlefield, families uprooted, lives shattered by endless violence. We see it, but we ask you to see our pain too. See our hostages who remain buried in tunnels, enduring unspeakable torment, separated from loved ones for nearly 2 years. They are our sons and daughters. Healing is impossible while they remain in captivity. And see, too, the ghost towns along the Gaza border. Homes abandoned, families displaced, scattered communities living with trauma and fear. They deserve the right to return and rebuild, not for a fleeting respite until Hamas rearms. They deserve the promise of lasting safety. We are not asking you to support the Israeli government blindly. Israel's leadership, like any democratic nation's, has flaws, internal debates, and faces rightful scrutiny. What we are asking is for you to understand the human side here in Canada and in Israel, to remember that Israel did not start this war. On October 7th, Hamas and its allies invaded sovereign Israeli territory and committed atrocities not seen since the Holocaust. Israel responded as any nation would to defend its people. Every single Israeli has lost someone or is close to someone who has lost someone since that day. The shofar we blow today echoes their cries for justice, their cries for peace, a true, lasting peace. If you cannot find it in yourself, Mark, to care about all innocent lives on both sides, Israeli and Palestinian, Jewish and Muslim, that are caught in this terrible tragedy, then it is not humanity you believe in. It is not a mosaic. It is a selective story that erases one side's suffering to amplify another's, driven by media biases or political expediency. Mark, we are a strong people. We love and support one another fiercely. Our chesed, our acts of kindness, shine through in the meals we deliver to the elderly, in food drives that serve the vulnerable regardless of faith, and in funds that sustain families wounded by hatred. Through every trial, expulsions from Spain, inquisitions in Portugal, pogroms in Russia, the Holocaust's unspeakable horrors we have endured. Each time we rebuilt, carrying forward an unbroken spirit and a faith in life. We will not break. And we will not lose sight of the tremendous victories Israel has secured, even as Canada voices its criticism. On October 7th, 2023, our enemies were rejoicing, believing it was the beginning of Israel's end, a day when Iran's massive investments in terror would finally succeed. Well, guess what? They were wrong. 2 years later, Hamas has been dismantled. Hezbollah has been crushed. Iran's military leadership has been decimated. Its nuclear ambitions rolled back years. Israel has restored deterrence across the region. The free world will not acknowledge the service that Israel has rendered on its behalf. That's okay. We see it. We know it. And out of all we have witnessed since that dark day, one truth stands beyond dispute. The Jewish people need a strong Israel. That conviction is now seared into the hearts of every Jew. Can anyone seriously argue that Jews would be safer in today's world without Israel? To deny the necessity of a secure and powerful Jewish homeland is to deny both the lessons of history and the stark realities of our present. So this Rosh Hashanah, Mark, as we are called to turn toward truth, empathy, and action, I urge you to turn towards us. Sit with us. Hear our stories. Condemn antisemitism unequivocally, without qualification. Support every effort to bring our hostages home. That's what's going to end this war. Through diplomacy, through pressure on Qatar and Iran, through whatever leverage is at hand. Advocate for a peace that ensures real security for all. Defend liberal democracy. Champion dignity for every human being. Speak out for the right of every Canadian to live free from fear. Work toward a Canada where merit, compassion, and unity triumph over division, and where those who incite, excuse, or perpetrate violence are swiftly and decisively rejected. Turn toward us and let us work together to ensure that our country remains the true north, strong and free. At a visit to a local mosque a few months ago, you said that Muslim values are Canadian values. I can't speak to that, but I know with certainty Jewish values are Canadian values. And to you, my beloved Beth Tikvah community of hope, while it may be tempting to despair, the shofar reminds us that despair is not our inheritance. These are indeed difficult times, but our inheritance is courage. Our inheritance is faith. Our inheritance is the will to step forward even when the path is uncertain, even when the waters have not yet parted. The shofar is a cry of anguish, but it is also a trumpet of defiance. It proclaims to every tyrant, every hater, every cynic, we are still here. We are still a people. We are still a covenant. We are still a light that refuses to be extinguished. This year, let the sound of the shofar not only pierce the heavens, but also resound in the halls of power. Let it shake the conscience of leaders who hesitate to act. Let it summon courage in the hearts of those who are silent. Let it remind all who hear it that Am Yisrael does not cower, does not bow, and does not break. And may it call each of us to rise above fear, to speak with clarity, to love with ferocity, and to live with integrity. May the Holy One inscribe us, our families, our community, our people, and indeed all humanity in the book of life, not merely for survival, but for a life of dignity, of justice, of peace, and of unwavering hope. And may the final blast of the shofar this season be not only an echo of our pain, but the herald of a year redeemed.